light. Shadows creep and crawl with every scream. Hear the echoes call. Synths and guitars in a haunting blend. An 80s vibe where the terror transcends. Shocktoberfest, scream until dawn. In your nightmares, the terror's reborn. Lights flash, monsters take flight. Embrace the darkness, it's a metal night.
How's it going, everybody? Wildman Wes here, and welcome to Day 12 of Shocktoberfest 80s Rewind. We're going to be closing out 1983 with a sequel. And as I said on Day 11, it's a long-awaited sequel because the first one of this series that we reviewed was from the beginning, from Shocktoberfest number 1. We're going to be talking about the long-awaited follow-up sequel of Psycho 2. The first one came out roughly around 1960 to 1961, where we have the story of Norman Bates, who runs the Bates Motel, and he is, for lack of a better phrase, nuts. He's a psycho. He thinks his mother's still alive, even though she's been dead for years. And he starts taking people out because he hears the voice of his mother telling him to do so. Well, after the events of Psycho 1, he is taken into a institution. And 22 years later, he is up for parole. His doctor has convinced the court that Norman Bates has been rehabilitated and he's ready to go back into the real world. Well, as Norman goes back to the real world, he goes back to his former establishment of Bates Motel, where it is run by someone else that's not doing a very good job about it. And while he's being released from the institution, we have Lila Crane, one member of the cast from the original film who survived, who said, no, he killed my sister. I'm not gonna stand for this. And she harasses him throughout the whole entire situation, even when he gets to the hotel. While he's at the hotel, he's meeting the said person that's caretaking it, and he has a problem with how it's being run. And in the incidents of what's happening, unfortunate events happen. People start dying. Mysteriously, tragically, brutally. And Norman is being questioned because, from the events of the first movie, because he was responsible for them, he, of course, is going to be accused of what's happening in this film. While Norman is maintaining his innocence of the incidents happening in present time, he meets a young woman named Mary that works at the diner that he has been employed at recently as a part of his parole and rehabilitation into the public life. And she starts to have a romantic bond with him, and he is definitely trying to stay away from that because of his rehabilitation. He doesn't want to go back to his old ways and mother talking to him. And while he's fighting this situation, he starts seeing mysterious notes and getting mysterious phone calls from his mother, and he feels like he is losing his mind. And while he feels like he's losing his mind, other people are getting picked off one by one that know too much. And as Norman is battling between his wits' end of seeing all these messages and getting phone calls thinking that it's his mother, and also battling his emotions for Mary, we find out that Lila Crane and Mary are related, mother and daughter, and they've been making this plan to get Norman to lose his mind and get revenge and possibly get him in trouble and frame him for all of the deaths occurring in this film. Eventually, things for Lila and Mary don't go according to plan. Lila gets busted by the authorities. Meanwhile, Norman gets to reclaim his innocence in this situation and do his best to live a normal life. However, at the very end of the film, a woman comes to visit and says that she is actually Norman's biological mother, and she was not fit to be a mother at the time, so she gave him to her sister, Norma, to take care of him, and she felt so bad about it. But Norman hits her with a frying pan, and she's dead. He carries her upstairs, and he hears his real mother's voice for the first time. So there you have it for Psycho 2. When it comes to sequels, they can always be a hit or a miss, no matter what character is involved. Whether it be Norman Norman Bates, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Chucky, Pinhead, Michael Myers, you name it, the list goes on and on and on and on. But we've done a lot of those reviews, so we're going to stick with Norman Bates right now, okay? We're going to talk about what I like and what I don't like about this film. Starting off with what I like about this film, I do love the cast in general. The fact that we have Anthony Perkins coming back to reprise the role of Norman Bates even after 20 years from the first film, that's great because sometimes when you recast a character, especially the villain, it can be very difficult, especially when they have such range. And Anthony Perkins, with the movies that he's been in, whether horror or otherwise, he has some great range. Also coming back for the sequel, we have Vera Miles, who played Lila Crane in the original film, as well as for this one, which was great to have another character, especially a survivor. That's one thing about horror films that is very vital in making sequels. When you have a survivor, it's necessary to bring them back. Some movies have not brought characters back. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but for something like a sequel coming out over 20 years later, it's kind of nice to see where they've gone, what they're up to, what psychological scars have either been cleaned or still left a mark. We also have legendary actor Robert Loggia playing Norman Bates' doctor who helps him rehabilitate to get out back into society. Also, the character of Mary is played by Meg Tilly. The name sounds possibly familiar, right? Meg Tilly is the sister of Jennifer Tilly. So great, it's nice to see that horror runs within the family. Apart from the cast, we have Jerry Goldsmith, legendary composer doing the music, and he never fails to impress. I love a lot of the work that Jerry had done in his career, and Psycho 2 is no different. In the concept of the plot, it's interesting to see that someone else was his mother and gave him up. And the fact that you find that out later on in the film, it kind of strikes a nerve, where it almost feels like a situation of Empire Strikes Back, where it's, no, Norman, I am your mother. Going off of yesterday's episode with Dagger Eyes, this one doesn't really have a lot of red herrings on the whodunit, per se. A lot of this is someone is harassing Norman, and we need to figure out who it is, but we don't really have a lot of leads in the situation. And when we find out that Lila Crane and Mary are the ones responsible for harassing him until he falls pretty much close to the brink of madness, it really strikes a nerve where you sit there going, you know, if you had just left Norman alone, maybe this stuff wouldn't have happened again for a third time, a fourth time. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. There are other sequels, and a lot of them probably not for the best. But we're focusing on part 2 right now. We're going to keep sticking with this one. It is interesting to see the energy between Norman and Mary throughout this film, because you see that Norman really wants to fit back into society without the stigma of the events that occurred 20 years prior. And watching him slowly lose his mind by seeing the notes that are supposedly from his mother or getting the strange phone calls. It's very eerie and disturbing because at first we think, is he really losing his mind? Did he really get rehabilitated? But then when we find out who's responsible, I wouldn't say that it was hokey or bland. I would say it was possibly expected because of the fact that we see Lila Crane throughout the film, and also being asked where she was at certain times when certain people were getting taken out. And at that point, that's probably the only red herring situation I can think of. But apart from that, I liked how they made the story flow so well that you automatically thought from the beginning when Norman was getting notes and phone calls that he hadn't changed at all. Now it's time to grade this film. I do appreciate what they tried to do with this sequel because of the fact that when you have a character in a horror film that's a villain survive and bring them back for the sequel and they're going back out into the real world, you have to try to find a fresh way to not recreate the first film. They did what they could with this, and they were successful for the most part. However, I had seen this movie years ago, and coming back in retrospect watching it, it didn't age as well as I thought. It's that I feel some of the pacing That's one of those things I keep talking about, pacing, pacing, pacing. It does tend to derail at times because of the fact that in this plot we're wanting to see the new journey of Norman Bates. And there's these moments of he's starting to finally get into society again, and then derail, we got up the phone calls, up the notes, and then we start moving back and trying to get back on track, and all of a sudden now we're having to talk with Lila again about where she was, and it's not about Lila right now, it's about Norman. Let's focus on Norman right now, because if we don't focus on Norman, he might put on the dress again and start, taking people out. That's normal, that's his MO. Speaking of going off the rails, I'm starting to do that right now, so let's get back to the grade. With looking back on this, since I hadn't watched it in a long time, and in retrospect, it didn't age well as I thought it did. And though the acting is fairly decent, I feel that the pacing on this one definitely, it hit me in a rough way. But I will be lenient, I guess, or not even just lenient, I will be fair. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, because sequels are not easy to be successful after the original film. And with this sequel, because Alfred Hitchcock, who had directed the original film, passed away 3 years prior to this sequel coming out, it's very difficult to live up to that standard of quality. And that being said, I'm going to give this a solid B. I feel that is a very fair grade for a sequel that wanted to live up to the mark, but might have missed it slightly. Well, we hope you enjoyed this review on Psycho 2. If you've seen this movie and agree with me, leave a thumbs up, and if not, I understand. Not every movie's for everybody, especially the sequels. Also, make sure to share on social media, push that subscribe button. Let's get us up to 500 subscribers before the end of this year. Also, make sure you ring that bell for instant notifications so you don't miss out on any of the content we have here on this channel. Until then, I'm Wildman Wes, and we will see you tomorrow for day 13, lucky or unlucky, of Shocktoberfest 80s Rewind. Take care, and as always, stay scared, kiddies.